So great to have you here. So much to talk about in so little time. So let's get to it. Who are you? What do you do? What you're a doctor of? Go for it.
All of it. Okay. So I am Berra, and or Dr. Berra, as some of my friends sometimes call me. I work at MAPS, which stands for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. MAPS is a nonprofit, tax-exempt charity that's been around for 35 years, and I've been with MAPS for the last 12 years. So I'm just on my 12th anniversary this month. And I am a PhD in molecular, cell, and developmental biology. I have a dual appointment with MAPS's subsidiary, the MAPS Public Benefit Corporation, as their chief scientific officer. And whenever there's science involved with MAPS's work, I'm there. So I have background in clinical research, and before MAPS, when I was working on my PhD, I did a variety of structural biology, biochemistry, teaching undergraduate students, and when I was in grad school. And I bring all of those skills to enhance our scientific clinical research and non-clinical research programs at MAPS.
That's great. How did you get interested in the field of psychedelics to treat mental illness?
So my first interest in psychedelics specifically was when I was in Turkey. I got really interested in kind of altered states of consciousness, or non-ordinary states of consciousness. I was really into transcendentalism, Salvador Dali's art, Alice in Wonderland, all sorts of stuff. And this inspired me to come to California. Little did I know that I was coming to a research hotbed for psychedelics. So when I was an undergraduate at Stanford University, I got really interested in how drugs affect the brain. So I took a class with Robert Sapolsky, who's a very famous PTSD researcher who looks at, the impact of stress on the body, white blood cell counts going down due to stress, that kind of stuff. So I took several classes with him, and that really was my foundation for getting interested in psychedelic clinical trials. And then when I was finishing up my PhD, I discovered that I was in the same town as MAPS, fortuitously. And so I started at MAPS as an intern while I was writing up my dissertation. And then I started working on the clinical trials as a clinical research associate. So I would travel to the clinical trial sites and meet with the doctors that are running the studies and make sure that they were following the protocol. And I would check their data to make sure it matched the medical records, so that our databases were accurate. So I worked on all of the MAP sponsored clinical trials to date. And so I've worked on studies of MDMA assisted therapy for treating post-traumatic stress disorder. I've worked on cannabis studies to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. I've worked on observational studies looking at the kind of naturalistic use of ibogaine for an intervention for opioid use disorder. And I've also worked on an LSD study in combination with psychotherapy for treating anxiety that's associated with having a life-threatening illness diagnosis. So furthermore, my brother is autistic. He's on the autism spectrum. And so that really inspired me to design a study that was ultimately sponsored by MAPS, looking at the use of MDMA-assisted therapy for treating social anxiety within an autistic adult population. And so lots of really interesting research, and really informed by my personal experiences and my family trying to help folks with chronic mental challenges and mental health challenges.
That's great. Thank you. What is PTSD?
PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. And, people initially think of PTSD as a mental health or psychiatric diagnosis. However, PTSD really affects the body a lot. And so there's a lot of really interesting books like The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, looking at the impact of trauma on one's physiology. So PTSD is, the current thinking around PTSD is that not only does it affect the brain, but it also affects the immune system and how our hormones function. And so I think the prevailing model right now is that it's the inability to turn off a fear response, even in the absence of imminent threat. So people are living in a constant state of fear, chronic stress, it wears and tears on the body, and it's very hard to treat. So there's 2 approved medications out there that are SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These are Paxil and Zoloft. So these were approved about 17 years ago by FDA and are approved on a worldwide level. However, they're not enough because many folks are unwilling to put up with the side effects. There's been a perception that their effectiveness has decreased over time among the patient population, and people are really avoiding using these medications. About half the population, even if they know they have PTSD, chooses not to use medications to treat it. And some of those folks are willing to try psychotherapy or talk therapy, which does work among the people that, who are able to tolerate it. But it really requires one to be okay with talking about their trauma, which is really scary and can bring the traumatic nightmares and intrusive memories back to the surface. So there's really an important need for having additional methods to treat PTSD.
Okay.
MDMA is short for 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine. So it's a chemical compound that is similar to mescaline, as well as similar to other stimulants and amphetamines. However, MDMA's effects are not like either one of them. It's something new. So in a medical setting, we find that MDMA is able to promote trust and self-compassion and reduce fear response. And this is an effect that is seen in healthy volunteers as well as PTSD patients. And in general, it's only used under therapeutic or medical supervision in our clinical trials, and it's given 3 times. So it's not a take-home medication, and it's given under the supervision of clinicians in controlled settings.
Okay, so that brings me to my question. What is MDMA assisted therapy?
So this is the magic that happens when we take something that we know can work, which is psychotherapy, and make it easier to tolerate. And that's what the role of MDMA is in this. So MDMA, our clinicians think of MDMA as a key to a door. And so the door is able to be opened, and then you still have to be willing to walk through it. So with MDMA assisted psychotherapy, we're able to enable the patient to discover their inner healer. And this inner healer is the body's innate ability to heal itself that ties into the immune system and all sorts of really physiological mechanisms that we all have within us, but we tend to not be able to access under normal circumstances. So with MDMA assisted therapy, the inner healer is able to become the guide of the patient, and the therapists are there merely to facilitate the inner healer being able to do its thing.
Great. What is psilocybin assisted therapy?
Psilocybin assisted therapy is philosophically similar in that there's also again, the inner healer who is present within all of us. And psilocybin is the active ingredient in mushrooms, in certain mushrooms. There's a couple psychoactive ingredients in mushrooms that are relevant to mention in addition to psilocybin, like there's psilocin as well. And so these are also another key to the door that enable the inner healer to direct, what the body needs in order to facilitate healing. And overall, with psychedelics, we think a common mechanism is that they're capable of decreasing cognitive rigidity, meaning that people can have in their brains, they can have more cognitive flexibility, develop new ways of approaching an issue, developing new insights, new point of view. And so we think that's a unifying property across all psychedelics.
Yeah. How far are we from this kind of therapy, MDMA-assisted therapy, becoming commonplace, becoming something for the public?
So this is what MAPS works on. MAPS is a research sponsor. We work directly with regulatory agencies to develop the data that will help the regulatory agency have a sufficient evidence base to evaluate for approval. So once FDA approves this treatment, we anticipate this will probably be in early 2024 on the basis of the data that we're currently gathering and plan to submit for review. So in the US, that's really our timeline, is looking at 2024. But in the meantime, we have approval for an expanded access program from FDA, which would enable currently 50 patients to receive MDMA-assisted therapy for treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder. And we hope to conduct those treatment trials, and on the basis of data, request an increase in the number of patients that we might be able to include.
Great. Thank you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. We're here with Dr. Berra Yazar-Klosinski, talking about MDMA-assisted therapy. Maps.org. Check it out. Great. What I want to ask you is that this is so amazing that this is going to be happening soon in 2024. We hope. But I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are probably doing things illegally and irresponsibly, or maybe in the best interest of themselves. They're trying to heal themselves. What should people do? What should people do in this situation?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that currently in the United States, psychedelics are generally considered to be illegal. Some states have launched some initiatives to enable therapists to be able to utilize these compounds in a controlled and safer environment. However, the supply that is available is still not necessarily produced according to the highest standards. So I think from a risk management perspective, we really don't recommend that that patients attempt to heal themselves. But we are currently actively enrolling for clinical trials, and we have our compassionate use or expanded access program that we've been able to get approval for. So probably safest thing is to at least reach out and seek help. We do have evidence from the literature that psychotherapy is helpful and can also form a kind of orientation or a basis for patients who might be interested in receiving MDMA-assisted therapy in the future.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, for myself, not to go too much into my story, but I would be very interested in at least one session of PTSD-assisted therapy, or 2 or 3, right? Is that how it goes, right?
Yeah, so we have had some folks who have been able to see a clinically meaningful response after one session, but it's not the norm. Typically, from our studies, we see that having 3 sessions with MDMA spaced about a month apart is the most helpful. But for some people, on average, We also see that 2 sessions is very beneficial for most folks. And not everybody responds to this. That's also really important to note. This is still an investigational treatment. It's only allowed to be used in research settings. And we have to get approval for every step of being able to conduct these types of studies from FDA, DEA, institutional and independent review boards that monitor the safety and ethics of the research participants. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into these studies. They're quite complicated to run.
Yes, yes, and it's been going on for 35, 36 years now.
Yeah, so MAPS as a nonprofit has been around for 35 years, and the studies that were conducted with MDMA started in 2003 with the very first clinical trial in the US. There was a small study in Spain prior to that. That was an independent study that we were still somewhat involved in. And so that one was published in 2008, I think. Yeah.
Mhm. Very interesting. I
Mhm.
want to know, how is psilocybin used to treat substance abuse?
So these studies are primarily conducted in university settings. So Johns Hopkins University has made some great strides in studying the use of psilocybin-assisted therapy for smoking cessation. And also there's a lot of interest in treating alcohol use disorder. So with psilocybin, the basic treatment model is still the same template. And we're looking at the effects of 1 or 2 sessions with psilocybin. And in these trials, although I don't have direct experience working on them, I've seen some videos. And so the patients lay down with eye shades on, and they listen to music, and they have kind of guides or facilitators who support them in their inner journey. And during that inner journey, often what I'm told the patients are experiencing is that they're able to see their lives from a different perspective. And this shift in perspective enables them to realize that the substances that they're using to dampen their symptoms or to kind of avoid their problems are taking them away from being able to resolve the issues. And so with that shift in perspective, we see that there's oftentimes very durable improvements after these studies. Long-term, 12 months later, we're seeing continued reduction in or oftentimes complete cessation in nicotine use, for example.
That's a huge breakthrough.
Yeah. A lot of people are really affected by all these things we're talking about today. And especially in the current political and cultural climate that is present both in the United States and worldwide, it's really important that people understand why they feel the way that they feel, and that they have the tools available to them to do something about it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. We'll be right back. I want to ask you a question about entheogenic awareness. What is that?
So I think entheogenic awareness has some spiritual overtones, really. I think I've been reading some books lately about the role of entheogens in the development of religion around the world and what people's understanding of spirituality, both within themselves and in their communities. And there's thousands of years of entheogenic spiritual sacraments that have been utilized that have really influenced our world and our culture and our societies. So for me, what entheogenic awareness means is that psychedelics that are entheogens enable us to come to these realizations, and that there's really a unifying subconscious that is within all of us. And with that awareness, then we realize that actually we're all one, and we should set aside our
differences.
Day-to-day. Well, the differences I think are important, right? It's like you want to celebrate the differences and set aside the concerns about the differences. Yeah. That's why we focus a lot on diversity and inclusiveness in our work. And, you know, as an organization, we've been engaged in doing this deep education, really, of ourselves and one another for, you know, the last 3 years.
Essentially, it's healing the world.
Yeah. With entheogens. Yep.
Very good. So we talked about many different things today. I wanted to ask you, because it's been brought to my attention even before we did this interview, it was asked to me, what's going to happen? How would the drug companies react to this? Would they hop on board? What would happen? You know, God willing that these things are available to the public and that people can be treated.
I mean, it's a great question. Basically, what we're doing is proposing a different way of doing drug development than what has been the standard for central nervous system drugs over the last several decades. So MAPS, as the research sponsor, is essentially a drug development or medical research company. And specifically in central nervous system areas or psychiatric medications, there's actually been a drastic reduction in the number of companies that are willing to pursue new treatments over the last decade or so. And there's just really kind of this apathy that I think a lot of drug companies have perceived. You know, the really big SSRI medications, they were approved, you know, 17, 20 years ago. And then, you know, I think currently the prevailing opinion is that the risks don't justify the benefits of these drugs for some patients. And as a result, there's been some new drugs that have been, you know, approved, like antipsychotic medications, et cetera, that have really kind of replaced the original SSRIs in terms of the prescribing trends of psychiatrists. So, and those don't necessarily have the efficacy demonstrated for treating psychiatric disorders like PTSD. It's just a different kind of medication. So I think that there's really a need for re-envisioning mental health and how we approach the people who are experiencing mental health challenges. And, you know, furthermore, just in the United States, the way that mental health challenges are approached really went through a lot of shifts over time, where, you know, the kinds of doctors that are able to treat mental health challenges have changed over time. Whether these treatments are inpatient or outpatient has shifted a lot over time. And we really want to bring back the clinic model, where a team of care providers work together with varying credentials and approaches to help patients in a more holistic manner through psychedelic clinics.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. Great. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and for taking the time and being available. Thank you. It's really great. I hope people check out maps.org. And for more about this show and more, go to lifeonlifeterms.com, toddgoldfinger.com, and tell your device to play Todd Goldfinger. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Todd. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. See you next time.
Bye.